Hi. Part of the symptom of my path is being kind of scattered, so. And I'll kind of get into that because it's a part of just life, really, and being a mom and trying to pull stuff together. So thank you, everybody. I'm really excited to share this. I was blown away by my two colleagues' presentation, and I'm not going to repeat too much of what they shared. I don't think I can repeat anything that Andy shared. I haven't had those kind of experiences, but some kind of time travel as far as tracing our origins has taken place and sort of journeying into that. And then Alfred just covered so much, and it was just amazing. So I might just make reference to some of the points that he made. But right now it's really about looking at where we're headed and what is the missing link right now, and what are the most important aspects that we can really understand in order to restore our planet, restore ourselves, and activate and awaken. And so Alfred was saying, you know, what is this universe called? And I was thinking restoration verse, because we are not really in a typical scenario, because we're almost having to rebuild, reintegrate, come into balance, and have the cosmic ecosystem come into equilibrium through understanding how connected we are to everything and how this is all really within ourselves. You know, we tend to look outside of ourselves, God, devil, but these are creative forces inside of us, and we get to choose how these forces play out. And the tarot is a great revealer of that, all the different archetypes. So if you shuffle and you get the devil card, it's like, no, you're not Lucifer, you're not doing evil. What does that card really mean? It connects to the earth, it connects to Kundalini, it connects to power. How we choose to use that power is up to us. So in order to deactivate or really take care of, you know, the damage of some of these forces is to learn how to integrate and become whole and not live in a dualistic mentality, which is what our planet is right now. And in turn, us as individuals emanate that kind of universe, that kind of existence, that kind of body, planetary body, because we all are the planetary body. Our bodies are basically Gaia. We are the physical earth. And when we can see ourselves as such and understand the chakra system, we can, you know, understand how to restore things. So alternative 4, I will be getting into a positive human future. And it's about the positive timeline, you know, but does that mean that there's no negative? No. It's about the positive being recognizing that there is light and dark. But in order to not create a negativity towards the darkness, part of that integration is about understanding that the darkness is the fertile creativity. It's like the mother womb. It's for fertile soil. It's where everything gets birthed. But in that darkness, a lot of secrecy and deception has lurked in. And what has happened through religion and through these power structures is we fear the darkness. We fear ourselves. We fear our power. We know we have it in our hands, and sometimes we're intimidated by our own abilities, our own, you know, power, and our ability to birth and create regardless of what gender we are. So positive timeline would be how to handle forces of polarity without saying, well, one has to go. You can't get rid of the dark. We love the dark. The night sky, the universe, darkness is a huge part of who we are. So the positive timeline is a way to understand how to deal with the forces that are already here in a way that is positive, in the sense that we grow, we evolve, we create well-being, and we lift these veils and unlock the prison gates. But we have to realize we're already free. I mean, we came here free. We are born of freedom. We're born of divinity. And this whole enslaved planet, well, you know, we came here to, a lot of us didn't really come to necessarily create the American dream or have some sort of great life of abundance and say, wow, I did really good, time to die. I certainly did not come from that. We're more, you know, realizing that we have much stronger missions and much stronger purposes that are digging way deeper. And so a lot of us are realizing this and waking up to it. And you can't imprison, you know, a free spirit, a free mind, and a free heart. And so when we hold on to that, we can realize, you know, we're in these cycles, but these cycles are coming to an end. I'm not even using my PowerPoint. But okay, no, I am. All right, so I've never done PowerPoint before, by the way. So anyway, so alternative 4. We have alternative 1, 2, and 3, which I'll get into later. And so, you know, positive human future, that's the real timeline. When we think of negative timelines, it's similar to subpersonalities, where we might have a day where we're out of whack and maybe having a negative time, not feeling centered and falling off the mark here and there, maybe in an accident or doing something that just is reminding us of where we need to be. And that's what the negative timelines are. They're here to help us fall on our face and do things that we might feel a victim to, but at the same time, we have to realize that it does snap us into our center if we can utilize it correctly and get us out of victim consciousness and get more into our strength and power. So negative timelines are similar to me as subpersonalities where, you know, you make a mistake, you hurt somebody's feelings, and you have the sense to say, I'm sorry, and you get back on track, back to your center, back to your truth, back to who you really are. And the negative timelines, you know, we're dealing with a macro universe, a macro world that's very similar to us. The same laws apply. So a negative timeline would be like the subpersonality of creation that is just having a really weird time. These archonic forces, you know, to me are part of the ego of our universe and also part of the cancer cells. When ego runs out of control and is not integrated, it has a detrimental effect on one's health. And so when we think about, you know, what are these beings that want to eat us? And I'm sorry if I laugh about serious things because it's also, you want to cry, you want to laugh. So I'm going to choose laughter. So, yeah, what is up with, you know, these beings and these races that want to enslave and hold souls captive? Well, in a sense, you know, from the very beginning, the archonic forces are birthed in a sort of way that the demiurge and the lower creator, the little g, has spawned agents of itself that have lost even ego and have become just parasites, like cancer cells. They want to engulf, they want to destroy, they see something that is vulnerable, and they're able to engulf it and take it over, similar to cancer is in the body. So I'll be going into that so that we can understand that this is not a drama or a scenario that is out of our hands, because on a personal level, we are dealing with the same principles when we deal with wanting balance and well-being. And it really comes down to the fact that our universe is a love story. And it all comes down to sacred union. It all comes down to understanding the duality is the nature of a higher and lower mentality. And if anybody thinks that I'm picking on men during this presentation because I'll be getting into the patriarchy, and don't think that, because we've been men, us women, and men have been women. So it's not about gender. It's not about blame. It's really about just the balancing act of creation. And so, you know, the negative aspect of the masculine would be arrogance, dominance, and control, but the negative aspects of the feminine would be victim consciousness and maybe using, you know, certain energies to manipulate and get one's way. I don't know those because I'm such a great person. But I mean, I'm joking, but at the same time, I've made it a mission to live in integrity. So really, I can't get away with a lot without getting majorly smacked in the face by something that says, no, because that's not the kind of path I'm on. So anyway, I am going to tell a little story in a little bit. First of all, so Return of the Divine Feminine, Gaia Sophia, Sacred Union. Obviously, the feminine force has been a bit picked on and repressed and exiled. And there's been incredible agendas in religion and in government and in everything to kick that force out of the way, even demonize it, and make it just lesser than, and you know, objectified, and just, you know, but still everybody loves mom, you know. So there is this aspect of the feminine that's so pushed out of creation, yet everybody loves it. Most people love their mother. And so the mother aspect of creation does not necessarily reflect the way that we feel in family, because there is that level of respect and bond. So that's how we have to deal with the archons. They are children of the creator to a certain degree and do want to be loved. And in a sense, they are unintegrated. That's where they're unorganic. They are aspects of sub-personalities that happened out of creation that want to return, that want to come back, that are just lost. And so inorganic in the sense that they are not functioning with a normal center, with a normal consciousness. They are agents that were birthed from fear and negativity when there was a leak in the pleroma, which I'll get into. So the Return of the Divine Feminine Energies is about awakening that force, dropping the historical nonsense, and really understanding what it means within the physical body, within our own nature, in order to create sacred union within oneself to create that balance, which we're doing on a larger level. So everything that we're trying to do on an internal level is going to have an effect on the external, of course. And so if we want to know what work needs to be done, we simply need to look at the conditions of the universe ecology, the cosmic ecology, and the earth, and see, well, where are we in relation to that? How are we perpetuating or allowing that to continue? What are we being? Are we healing agents, or are we agents of destruction? Are we buying into things? Are we letting ourselves be controlled, or are we stepping in our power? And then the Mars recruitment, I've had an interesting story where a lot of the macro stuff is sort of played out on a personal level, and just found myself always running into situations where people knew me before I was either born or handed me something that had to do with my path. I mean, I know I signed up for it, so that's fine. But it got a little weird because there was a point of maybe denial, or I'm thinking all these things and I have an intuitive notion of what I'm here to do, but it's just a little weird. So I'd put it on the back burner, and then wham, something would come along and say, no, this is real, this is true, and there's just no way I could escape it. So I'm going to share not the quantum access information or the information that the shadow government had through Looking Glass Technologies. There's a document that I received from somebody from very esoterical, sort of mythological sources. And so this can almost give a little bit of proof to some of the stories that we hear in spirituality and religion. Of course, religion has rewritten it in a way that works for them. But what I have is more, what we're really dealing with. And that's going to be kind of the first thing that I talk about and get into. So it's going to be a little bit about, I wouldn't say facts, but the chronological story of creation and sort of how it ties into some of the information that I've gotten and what my path has revealed. So, what's interesting is we determine the outcome of everything. There is not, there's wars going on. There's been wars going on since the beginning of time between light and dark, but ultimately we're the ones who decide who wins because it's what we give our power to. And so it's not out of our hands ever. It has to do with realizing that there's major soul work to do. And that's where the dark night of the soul, going into the underworld and facing that power, that darkness, comes in and really can't be avoided in order to take things to the next level, because that is where they have the ultimate manipulation, is to make us afraid of ourselves and to make us think that we're that we're dumbed down humans that are easily enslaved. Well, the DNA, yeah, maybe 2 strands, but what does that mean? It's the belief systems that have been manipulated that have affected our DNA. We tend to think, yeah, maybe they were in labs doing this and that, but it's really, DNA is more activated by consciousness and being in our higher chakras and bringing the light in and turning the lights on than us being predisposed and waking up in some genetic situation where we're controlled by our genetics. That's one layer of it. And what Alfred pointed out so wonderfully is about the spiritual dimensions, the exopolitics dimensions, and then the human factor. And the spiritual dimensions and the exopolitic dimensions are giving us information in order to know what to do to really return. So, okay, bling. Okay, galactic core. So let's start at the very beginning. That's from Sound of Music. Do you remember that song? It was in my head all morning. But I don't want to spend too much time here. Pleroma, Ein Sof, Sophia Barbelo, Brahman, how many names? Doesn't matter. Sophia Barbelo is referring to the cosmic womb and the feminine energies, or the mother energy, which is actually androgynous. So Sophia, in this case, isn't necessarily feminine or masculine, but the way that it works is that it's like the center of a circle, and it's also the circumference, and it kind of goes in and out and creates this void, creates this kind of vacuum. And some ancient texts talk about it as far as how it just sort of ended up becoming a part of a process of trying to understand itself. It just sort of wanted to know itself or do something with itself, because it was infinite light. And also darkness and the womb and the void, so that's light and dark matter. Sophia really represents dark and light matter in creation. And so from the void, let there be light, let there be existence. The song and the musical spheres of just creation ended up pouring out these aeons. Bythos is one of them, the deep, and another name for it is Sige, S-I-G-E, and I don't know if I'm saying it right compared to what other people normally Sige. And so these aeons, emerged, and a lot of these aeons had to do with states of mind, things like truth, understanding, wisdom. I'm not going to get all the cosmology absolutely correct. I have all the information, but I didn't want to get so much into the information and get lost in it, because I'm just going to try and look at it from the larger picture and just and just kind of run through it a little bit. So, we're dealing with essence and the Godhead and just, basic characteristics of a state of mind and a state of consciousness that is still in a sphere of divinity and integrity and goodness. And these aeons came out in pairs. And Christ Sophia was one of these aeons. And before the cosmic egg cracked, there was a double helix of the masculine and feminine within that egg. And there came a point where the pressure was such, and who knows how many years this all took, and there's no time, really, when you're in the universe. But the cosmic egg cracks, and that's the Ein Sof Or. So there's Ein Sof, there's Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Or. And so when that opening happened, that's what birthed the Tree of Life, but 4 worlds were birthed. And okay, well, where's the proof, right? I mean, we can just read Theosophy, read the Nag Hammadi. I probably said that wrong too. I just don't talk to a lot of people about this stuff, but I think about it constantly. So all this, of course, is happening, and these worlds are being created, but, like this particular one ended up having sort of a third wheel, I guess you could say, and that's where we hear about beings like Enki and Enlil, Jesus and Judas, Cain and Abel, and this Osiris and Seth. It's like, why does he have, this awful brother all the time that wants to, create destruction and control? And that's what the demiurge really is. So there was this extra pressure in this leak of the pleroma that created this lower sort of world. We call it little g, little God, who thinks he's the ultimate God, who refuses to acknowledge anything before him, that he even has a mother, and is completely opposed to unity consciousness, to the divine feminine, completely misogynist, except for unless it's under its control. So in that cracking process, my thought is that in this particular cycle, because there's been a lot of big bangs, this other energy ended up being birthed, because what happened in the leak of the pleroma, a part of the Sophia consciousness had leaked out. And the Gnostics really understood this, and ancient texts describe this. And nobody really knows why. There's about 4 or 5 different Gnostic views of what actually happened. And basically, it leaked. So it doesn't matter what happened. The point is, after that happened, because you can't really, it's not about sin, it's not about an error or a mistake, because it's not very nice to think we're living in a huge mistake. Yes, right now it feels maybe like that, but we're in a reintegrating restoration process, and when that happens, the gift that we all receive is immense, and we really do return to what it's like to have worlds emanated without all this duality, because that's really what was happening before this, was that worlds were being emanated from the Godhead, and there was never that force that was stepping out of it. It was just emanating, and it was dreaming and imagining, but when it leaked, it was like a part of the Godhead ended up falling into matter, and the primordial sea of chaos ended up going berserk and birthing every little thing that she could possibly think of. So when that leak happened, she's standing on the outside, like, can I please get back in? Well, a huge portion of the Sophia energy, of course, was still there. But what the Gnostics feel was an error was that in the longing and the desire to put herself back in, there was this thing that get created, which is this demiurge energy, which is the lower creator God, which is this sort of Seth, Enlil, this masculine energy that she ended up being the mother of, even though it didn't want to acknowledge him, and that's really what seemed to be a mistake. It wasn't her intention. And so this force ended up kind of growing in arrogance, because in a sense, when the creator wanted to know itself, the I of the creator formed kind of an ego, not necessarily positive or negative, but we all have one. Some people demonize the ego, like, oh, well, just get rid of your ego. If people have issues with it, sure. But the point is, to have a healthy ego, which is aligned with divine will. And so she wanted to, heal that energy and bring it back in, because it was created out of her fear, bewilderment, and confusion. And so that would be a negative ego response, which is the I am energy is freaking out. That's like an ego, when we all have a bad day, our egos are crushed and wounded, we're like, oh, I just hate myself, I'm the biggest loser, kind of thing. And so, and then that's a negative ego, but then the positive ego would be, I'm so great. So ego is duality. And this is what this force was. In the creator wanting to know itself, it ended up creating ego. And it's created all sorts of problems, but it's not a problem if we can just understand that this is an integrative restoration process, and this being that's the demiurge that we all probably don't like, is just like the ego of the universe that just needs integration and needs healing and needs us to step into our power and our divinity so that it can find a home and it can find a way of return and not run wreak havoc. And so the Christ Sophia consciousness, the unity consciousness, now has this third wheel. And this is the creation that we know of. And this has cast a huge veil on the planetary body because this all happened before the planet Earth came about. And so here comes planet Earth because, okay, first of all, Sophia, like I said, dark and light matter, has two sisters. So there's Tiamat, the primordial sea of chaos, which is basically the womb, and it's, birthing everything. And out of, this process, Lilith, as we know, Lilith in the Garden of Eden, who was the first wife of Adam, who ran away, represents Kundalini, and we'll get into that later about the Tree of Life. And then there's Dianu, which is also turns to Diana and other things. And Dana, who's in Irish mythology, represents the primordial waters, and these were the first two sisters that emanated from Sophia. So this is sort of like the feminine energies, branching out and becoming more aspects, and of course it leads to more and more aspects and other names, and there's 100,000 names in all different cultures. And so during the Tiamat period, the ancient ones were birthed, and this was pre-Demiurge. And then the leak happened, and I told you about the leak. So then that third wheel came along. But there was a lot of chaos going on before that, and I think that had something to do with the leak because there was a lot of murdering going on and a lot of craziness going on in that cosmic chaos. And there was a concern from the Godhead, like, why all this murder and why all this, maybe the leak was like, can you please stop? Oops. Who knows? There's so many different ways to see it, and I think when we all kind of journey into ourselves, we can kind of trace, these stories back because it really is our story. It's something that we hold within our soul code about what happened, and so we experience it differently. There's no ultimate truth. It's in the eye of the beholder and the person experiencing it, but this is basically the story, and it's from numerous texts, and the text that was handed to me confirms it. So I'm not just saying this because I read it somewhere, or that I thought it and it sounds great. I got this document, and I read it, and I was like, that sounds about right, but I couldn't believe it. And still, take it with a grain of salt, but I'll tell you how it came into my hands. So, okay, we got the archons, the demiurge, and the veil, archangels, higher star systems. So we're dealing now with the exopolitics universe, where, star systems are being created. We got, things like the Pleiades, seven sisters, that connects to the goddess Hathor. If people, learn about Hathor, she is connected to the seven sisters, the Tree of Life. And then Sirius with Isis, and so, and I mean, there's countless, and Joan is just brilliant as far as, just having so much connection and understanding of all them. I mean, you are, yeah, so I'm not going to, I'm not going to get into all that because we've gone there, right? So higher star systems, archangels, but there are also archdemons, right? So after the demiurge was created, this whole sort of imitation of the pleroma, the Godhead, ended up being formed, which created the seven heavens and seven hells. And the seven heavens and seven hells are this cycle of reincarnation that everybody goes through. But it's still within a bubble, and there's more above that. And so that's what we'll get into, is the ultimate liberation from this cycle of life and death, and where the zodiac and being ruled by the stars is really, what the code we're born with to play out, the strengths and weaknesses of ourselves. So we fall on our face, and we get it, and we figure it out, and then all of a sudden the wheel of necessity, the zodiac, isn't necessary anymore, and we can just kind of pierce through and get back to our immortal selves that is more capable of cosmic journeying and creating and just being much more the primordial parents and the blueprint of that, rather than this third wheel demiurge, who, yes, represents ego in a sense, but ego that has gone way out of control, that we are all healing by working on it within ourselves. And so there's a big rush for awakening because people are realizing that it's not just going to happen. It's not just something that's out there fixing it all. Sure, there's forces working behind the scenes, but it can't do a lot if we're being stubborn and we're not willing to co-create and be a part of it. And so anybody who's taken a physical body is up against that, even though we're wired differently and we carry certain frequencies that we're here to use our human bodies to express. So in seven heavens and seven hells, archangels like Michael and others, and the higher star systems that we hear about, and that's very much like messengers. They help us get to the higher realms that are higher than that, the Ein Sof, the place where we're connecting with our own power and our own fertility on a creative level to use our imaginations to birth worlds, to birth universes, to not be stuck in the restoration verse. So it's not flowing right, but something like that. So, right, okay. So the demiurge, yeah. his whole deal was this dragon of chaos, Tiamat, must be slayed. You know, that's too chaotic, too crazy. And the Demiurge connects to Yahweh and Enlil, who's the chief archon, which connects to the Old Testament, not the New Testament. And the Old Testament really tells the story of what we're dealing with and talks a lot about this type of stuff. And desires a slave race. It wants new world order, which means no more chaos, doesn't like chaos, wants to control. And this is the brother of Enki, and then later in Sumerian times, of course, we'll get into what's up with Sumeria. But the deal, I had all these notes. I guess I don't really need them. That's good. I was so worried. But maybe I should, well, no. I don't know. So basically, Nibiru was a place for the Demiurge and the Anunnaki energy to go, because it was basically cast out of the spiritual realms. It was the third wheel. The Demiurge was just not, you know, did not have an agenda that served unity consciousness and served union. And basically, when Sophia was able to pull herself back into the pleroma, a divine plan was created with the Christ energy, that there would be a chance for them to get together and restore the tree of life and return to wholeness. And that the wheel of necessity and everything that's playing out cycle after cycle and through all these eras has to do with this. This is why our universe is made of a love story with, you know, a brother who's like the lower male. You know, have you, you know, when you're with somebody, you're dating somebody, and you can just tell the guy is way more demiurge-like, way more archonic than Christ-conscious, you know, controlling, abusive, you know, just, and he'd probably be more leaning on that side. So every man and every woman has that duality within them they need to deal with. So, you know, it's like, oh, you can't transform him, he needs to transform on his own, to change, you know, everybody wants to heal them and change them. And sometimes it's just, yeah, it's up to them. So every man on a masculine level has to handle that third wheel within themselves, their ego nature, their desire to control, their desire to put the woman down, keep her in the kitchen, whatever, you know. And then the Christ consciousness energy would be more like, you know, uplifting the feminine and loving the feminine and honoring her. So men have that choice, and this is why I love my colleagues, because I don't think they would deal with me if they had any demiurge energy in them. You know? They don't, and they're so kind to me, and I'm just like, wow. So right on to them, because, and so many men here, I can just tell. So anyway, every man has that, and every woman has, you know, don't be like a victim, don't put up with the abuse, you know, we all hear. I mean, really the universe is in therapy right now, just like many go to therapy. It's the same kind of thing. You go there to deal with relationship problems, right? Well, the universe is asking us to heal it by doing the work. And so sacred union has been manipulated out of us, you know, the TV especially, because it just shows, you know, all sorts of scenarios where we become at war with each other. Instead of creating unity, we're playing out the universe's issues instead of taking a stand, because the media and the agendas out there, religion, all of it, is to completely keep us locked down in this cycle, because they have control over us as long as we're in that cycle. And even the chief archon has some dominion where he thinks he's a god, and has some dominion over even the seven heavens. Sophia exists on the 8th and above, and so comes in, and you know, many of us women, you know, use our, we just connect to that to bring about the transformation. So because he's where he's at, he's got a lot of agents. The archdemons are like the reptilians and, you know, certain lower races. And, you know, that connects to the Anunnaki. So basically he's like the ruler of the Anunnaki. And his agents are basically serve him, but there's so much darkness there that it's really unbelievable. And the self-preservation instinct, because it's collapsed even from ego into a parasitic form that just needs to stay alive, it is like a cancer cell, because it doesn't care. It just needs to live. It just wants to take over. It doesn't know. And so dealing with an organism, Gaia, who has a humanity that's out of balance, it's easy for that to thrive, because in our own physical bodies, when we're out of balance, we attract germs and parasites and illnesses, and, you know, and our minds can be very, you know, just, you know, having a difficult time. But at the same time, our consciousness overrides the genetics every time. And so even if we are dealing with or struggling with health issues, it doesn't mean that we're dealing with negative entities. It means that we're learning about the wisdom of our body. It's when we stay in healthy consciousness that we're fine. And so we don't have to pay attention to the physical, only in the sense that it is a wisdom teacher, and it'll help us understand on a root level, you know, what energies we need to awaken and integrate. But it's certainly not revealing anything else, because consciousness is where that happens. Who you give your power to, how you treat others, and this and that. Because the physical, these are shells, they die, and what lives on is what determines the next lifetime, the agreements that you make, who you want to see again, and this and that. So, but, you know, for the ultimate, you know, transformation, like, you know, restoring Gaia, who's got incredible issues right now due to the treatment of her by humanity and by these kind of folks. You know, the way to do the alchemy and create the healing is to, you know, really anchor the consciousness and let the light and let the wisdom, you know, regenerate, because there is a lot of magic. The ancient ones in these older worlds are made of magic and made of that. So there's Venus, and she works behind the scenes, and is basically a planetary body, the morning and evening star. So when we think of the morning and evening star, we know that it goes into the Earth and does this whole thing. And it's the closest, it's one of the brightest stars and one of the closest to the planet, and it's within the orbit, similar to Mercury, than these outer planets. So it has a huge relationship to the Earth, and it works with the Earth all the time. And so Sophia morphed into the physical planet, but also is very connected to the Venus energy. And so the two kind of work together on a feminine energy, cosmic level in order to bring about transformation. So when we tap into it, when we awaken it within ourselves, we can see that, you know, we are connecting and doing the part of getting our power back. With men too, because when they get their power back on a feminine level, they get more into Christ consciousness, because then they're in unity within themselves. They understand the relationship. They're not an ego. They're not trying to put that force down. They're saying, okay, that Venus energy is within me, and that's all about unity, and that's all about that consciousness. You know, in these certain eras of gods and goddesses, you know, a lot of them wanted to rule, but some didn't. That might have been considered goddess because they understood unity, they understood equality, and they didn't put themselves above anybody. They were more interested in waking people up to who they really are. And Venus is one of them. It's all about heart chakra. And in heart chakra, the bridge between heaven and earth, where is there hierarchy? There isn't. It's just about love, and it's about connection. And when we are in that space together, it doesn't matter who you are. Even if you're dealing with somebody who's lived in darkness and maybe done evil, sometimes you can just connect and you can melt away all these other things, because the heart can bring people back into balance and allow that equality to be there. I mean, when we're all in the room together and we're just connecting on a heart level, nobody knows. I mean, we don't rank anything, you know? It's not about that. So, okay, it's the only picture I could find. You know, but that's fine. It's Lemuria. So Lemuria, when creation came about, basically, our truest origins come from the Vega star system and Lyra. And so that was really, you know, what was starting to seed the planetary body as far as humans are concerned. And there was just incredible psychic power, incredible magic, incredible abilities. And the technology was really, really advanced, but it was very much in tune with abilities. And basically, they knew there was some sort of cosmic threat though looming over them, and they were aware that this planetary body, things are competing for, and there is this agenda from this Nibiru demiurge floating artificial thing, which is made of, I mean, ego. I mean, it's more than that, but misuse of power, all of that. That's just kind of like, you know, there. So that civilization kind of vanished. I mean, it was a part of Atlantis to a certain degree, but you know, I'm not maybe getting all the facts straight, but like I said, I'm just doing the bigger picture thing just to get just an idea and an understanding. I have, like I said, I could really map it out and get really, really into it, but I'm not going to do that. And then, you know, it's still questionable because we can only just consider the facts and really look within ourselves and find even deeper answers. But so, you know, Atlantis was those that chose to stay around, you know, ended up going over there, and many just went back to Lyra because they did not want to deal with the fact that this planetary body is being competed for, and wanted to protect themselves from getting into that bubble of entrapment, because some of the genetic codes needed to stay pure. And that's why we're returning to a more Lemurian type civilization again, is because those pure star systems and star seed types that, you know, we might find start to incarnate when the coast is clear are helping us to return, because many have chosen to keep their DNA pure, knowing that there would be a lot of manipulation taking place, which started in Atlantis, where there was obviously a lot of really good technology and advancement, and you know, big crystal thing in the middle of the time. I time traveled back in my head to that, and I just remember some big crystal, emerald I think it was, and then I think I read somewhere that, yeah, there was a crystal there, cool. So, basically, yeah, so that threat was starting to loom over, and they wanted to create more control. And you know, there's been a war in the universe, obviously. And so, you know, this is where I want to look at my notes, and I don't have them on my screen like my other colleagues did, so excuse me if I have to look down just for a minute. But the point is that control started to happen, and they started to dumb down DNA and realize that the only way that they could have control was to start to manipulate. But still at the same time, those that were in Lemuria wanted to maintain the Lemurian philosophy and keep things in a high vibration and unity consciousness, and so that was a threat to them, that they needed to kind of pull the plug, and they were really behind the destruction of Atlantis. There's fusion generators that are connected to the land, because nature is the ultimate. Once one understands the laws of nature, you can create any kind of technology. That's what Tesla understood. And you know, so the Anunnaki understood this, and most of those cultures did, and they had different things set up that related to frequencies and harmonics and just, you know, the elements, and were able to, you know, do things like that. And so that was where the Atlantean world started to get really threatened, and they started to feel that the slave race that they were attempting to create was going to get out of control, because they weren't being obeyed when they first started to do that manipulation. They had already taken hold somehow. And also those that were there, you know, were getting out of control with the technology and starting to lose a sense of consciousness and the magic and other types of awarenesses. And so this is really when a split started to take place and led to destruction because of the war between, excuse me, light and dark that was happening, that's been happening for a really long time. And that's why the Galactic Federation of Light was formed, because the reptilian Anunnaki force, you know, have been trying to take over so much. And at this point, they had already colonized Mars and Venus and had a foothold there. And so when they decided that they wanted to tear down Atlantis, a lot of them fled and left, and they're called the Anunnaki elite, and they went to Mars. Doesn't mean that they're native Martians. Their planet's really Nibiru, but they use that as a home base, and they're able to, like locusts, go and travel and create some level of control. So I just want to read something that John Lash wrote that really explains, you know, an understanding of these entities from the perspective of Gnosticism. Perhaps 1/5 of the intelligible material in the Nag Hammadi text concerns the origin methods and motives of the archons, also called authorities and governors. Their name derives from arch, which means first from the beginning, because according to Gnostic cosmology, they emerged at an early stage of the solar system previous to the formation of the Earth. These bizarre entities may be regarded as locust-like species of cyborgs with silicon-based bodies so designed to permit only brief forays into the Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. They inhabit the solar system at large, traveling among the planets in alien-engineered spacecraft. Okay, so, but they are kind of the ringleaders of those on Earth, and there's, you know, that's where we get into the Old Testament and this whole, you know, desire for the chief archon to be the god that is worshipped, and that, you know, everybody follows its orders. And through the dumbing down of DNA, nobody really questions it. During, you know, these cataclysms and these thinking of things like Atlantis, those that were able to run away, I think 600 million or so were able to escape, were able to build new civilizations that flourished. And then they worried about that, because if these civilizations were able to flourish, like indigenous cultures and things, you know, Egypt, Mayan, you know, all these higher civilizations and cultures, that was a big threat to them too. So even though Atlantis was sunk, a lot of folks, you know, were able to survive. And there was a duality there where some were still focused on the earth, focused on understanding the goddess energy and honoring the Divine Mother, and others that were basically like the ringleaders we see today that run the world government and religion, who answer to these so-called Anunnaki elite and are basically genetically coded to be connected with them. And this is where Sumeria comes in. It's basically Nibiru and the Anunnaki picking a place on Earth to start their civilization and to be a super civilization to the point where they feel that they're dominant to everybody, and that they, you know, rewrote history and basically have codices and information that is not accurate, that basically they wanted to wipe out as much as they could. So on top of the flood and the sinking of Atlantis, there was a major deluge that wiped out these other cultures and left behind the pyramids and things that we see. But they'll start to believe in and forget that these more ancient cultures were actually in total honoring of the goddess energy, and not so much in a worshipful way, but in honoring, you know, Mother Earth and the planetary body, and seeing, you know, embodiments of that as sacred and as you know, a part of the health and well-being of everything, and that they needed protection. So throughout the years, there were many among the various empires due to underground movements that you know, had to hide away. I mean, we hear about Hollow Earth. I mean, there's been things going on underground where a lot of you know, activity and a lot of the elemental spirits and beings, you know, ended up hiding out. And so the underworld, or what the Celtics call the underworld, you know, in Middle Earth is kind of connected to that. And so, you know, there's obviously, we're dealing with a major takeover. And okay, so they restarted their civilization on Earth, and that's where Sumeria happens. Okay, well, what's up with that Venus person? Well, that's also Inanna, right? So think of Sumeria. Think of this third wheel demiurge guy, right? Wanting to, you know, take over the Earth and create this civilization that was dominant and, you know, basically steering everybody into thinking that this was the most ancient civilization and had this and that, and there are real parents and there are the gods to be worshipped, even though there's genetic manipulation. Well, what happens to her? Because isn't she like a part of, you know, beyond the 7 heavens and 7 hells and in that zone? I mean, she must be somewhere. Well, due to that little error, or whatever you want to call it, of that leak and feeling somewhat responsible, the Sophia energy sent a aspect of herself to do something about it and to go through whatever it would take to bring about a restoration and a solution. And so this is our heart chakra. This is our unified field. This is what we all connect to. And so, okay, unicorn, I just wanted that picture. You don't see those anymore, right? I mean, but they're there. And Joan sees them on her property. So we know that they hide in other dimensions. Who would, you know, it's hard to be here. This is why I couldn't get in my body for 20 years. It's just not happening. But it's getting better. And then, you know, the Melisson, that's one aspect of the goddess. And 2 different energies kind of emerge from her. This and like the fairies, the starfire. So there's the starfire, which would be the Duloc, and then the mermaid, which is the Del Akis. And these were 2 different emanations kind of emerging from the Venus energy that created 2 different tribes. What you hear about in Ireland, the Tuath Danann. I'm terrible with pronunciation, so excuse me. And then the Melisson race, which was connected to Lilith. So that, again, represents the 2 sisters. There's Sophia, who is the Magdalene energy focusing on sacred union, and then the 2 sisters, the Lilitu being with the lily in the water and the mermaid, and the Dianu energy being the starfire and that tribe, the elfin and fairy races. So those are her 2 sisters and the tribes, and she's, you know, that's like her right and left arm. So they're all very connected. And it's the only one I could find again. Thinking of Atlantis. And I've already kind of covered that. I mean, the point of Atlantis and other goddesses in Buddhism and, you know, Hindu, you know, and then that's the Venus energy again, and Isis. So, okay, now what happened to all that, right? Well, that was the attempt to wipe out these civilizations, was really the attempt to wipe her out. And anything that had to do with the understanding of the planetary body as an organism, as a living being, and in exchange for this controlling third wheel, demiurge, archonic system that has agents of the reptilians and these agendas, the reptilian agenda, which is to completely enslave the human race and keep us from her. And that's why people find themselves really not liking women. That's a part of that manipulation, so you want to get that checked out. Because so here's just, you know, these are just pictures. Like I said, I haven't done PowerPoint before. This is the only picture I could find of them fleeing the planet. And then the deluge and the flood. And the culture's left behind because this is what they wanted to wipe out. The whole understanding of, you know, Isis and even though, you know, things kind of change. Okay, we have Sekhmet and Bast, which is a part of that energy, and part of Hathor, kind of the 2 forces in there. And I could get into the intricacies of all that, but the point is, the universe is made, it's a love story. And so when you think of Isis, okay, there's Osiris and Seth, right? Well, they had a whole mythology about that. So because I'm going to lead to getting to Mars and all this stuff, I'm going to start to get more into the personal thing. And, okay, there's those guys, okay. So, and then, yeah, who's that? reptilians. And here's Inanna. So, okay, back to the Venus energy. So she finds herself incarnating in a very difficult place because she was sort of surrounded by things that didn't support her anymore. And the Enlil energy and the Enki energy were in war. They were brothers. And same with the Osiris energy and the Seth energy were in war. And so all these dueling brothers, you know, about control, about suppression, and not coming together and understanding, you know, the nature of divinity and ego merging together, they were split. And that's what every man has to integrate and work on. And yeah, I mean, women carry masculine energy too, so it's a part of who they are too. They have masculine tendencies as well. So Inanna, who's Venus as well, and another incarnation, is dealing with going into the 7 realms of hell. And her way of restoring this sort of bubble of creation where this duality takes place in these cycles of reincarnation and the wheel of necessity and being ruled by stars. Sophie's connected to the stars, and she wears the zodiac or the crown of stars on her head. She has the moon beneath her feet and the sun and all this stuff. So she's really made of the cosmos. And so it connects to the Venus energy because that's the planetary body that she chooses as a pathway to you know, restore and go through the underworld in order to get her power back and create transmutation, transformation, and it's an alchemical process. So she finds herself in this family line, even though she's an ancient one, similar to her sisters. They carry a different frequency, but have to incarnate in here and do something about it. So she finds herself from the heavenly realms looking down below and saying, I'm going to take that plunge, right? And so the folks that she's hanging out in the higher worlds, because remember, Sophia was able to pull most of herself back into the pleroma, but has a divine plan to assist and restore everything rather than wipe it all out, because so many beings have been birthed and she loves them. And the lower creator God doesn't care, he just wants control. So she goes, because everything was wiped out, it created a sort of shattering effect on the goddess energy. Because these older cultures were wiped out that honored her, it like shattered her. So she's now trying to retrieve her aspects and has to go in the underworld because her dark sister, Ashrikigal, who is in the underworld, is what she has to connect with, because that's the light and dark, like the light and dark matter. In order for there to be restoration, there has to be the union of light and dark. And in order to do that and pierce the veil and the things that are blocking it, one has to go all the way in there and connect to all the different aspects that have been shattered and reclaim them and restore. And so her power sort of got lost, and she was able to do a portion of it. And you know, the Tree of Life and the World Tree are part of it. Lilith is a part of the story, and I could get into the myth and all that, but I won't. The point is, she was able to do it to a certain degree, and it was about restoring the land, and it only got so far, and the war between Enki and Enlil was lost to Enlil, and Enlil won. And that's why we're dealing with the reptilian agenda in such a way that we are right now. But anyway, she just keeps doing it. So, and so the Tree of Life, you know, was kind of, I mean, here's the Anunnaki bending over the Tree of Life. It's like they sort of have a mark on it. And that's kind of what happened in the life cycle of Inanna, was where the Tree of Life, which was what she represented, because the Hathor energy is also connected to Venus. It's just kind of like they started to, you know, kind of work with that. And a lot of the genetic manipulation has to do with the fact that we're all Tree of Lives. And if we look at the actual chart of the Tree of Life, that's really our makeup. That's our divine blueprint. And so the Anunnaki learned a lot about genetic manipulation through understanding the Tree of Life and what it means and how it's a part of all of us and it connects to our DNA. So here they are, you know. Looks like they're just kind of poking at it like, okay, how can we mess with that? And so, okay, then we have Adam and Eve. Okay, so this is where I'm going to kind of get into my story, because part of this information that I got was connected to this. And it was, I'll just kind of try and tell the story a little bit. I was just, you know, being a human in my life and realizing that there was all this control on me. And it wasn't just the shadow government or the things that are connected to the Mars recruitment. This does connect to it, though. There was just this force on me, starting at the age of 7. It was different than this, you know, the more psychotronic weapon type kind of attacks that kicked me out of my body all the time. It was like no matter what I tried to create or what I tried to do, there was some force always, you know, yanking me somewhere else. And I'm going crazy because here I am trying to just, you know, make money and just live a life, even though, you know, with all the passions and things that I care about on a planetary level, still doing that. But it's like I couldn't manifest anything. And, you know, my mom's just like, what is wrong with you? You know, it's just... And, you know, and just all the pressure, even just being in the family that I'm in, you know, and I'm just like, you know, homeless here and there, calling my mom, you know, living in my school bus, living in a car, just trying to create anything, and nothing would be created, to the point where I had no money, I had nothing. But then I was like, you know, just manifesting things and just realizing, well, you know, I'm out of all this other stuff, so this is fine. But at the same time, it's like I want some stability. And, you know, eventually I'd like to be able to have a, you know, some kind of abundance or some way to just have a bit more balance with all this. You know, I could still, you know, live that lifestyle. But so anyway, after a certain point, after I had my boys, I just said, I'm done. Okay, first of all, I've said that almost every day for the last 10 years. I can't take it anymore, I'm done. That's like my motto, but of course, I continue. So anyway, I just decided I have to see what this is all about. So I let go. I said, I'm going to let that force take me to where it is. And everything, all kinds of habits. Because like I said, I was just trying to create things. I was trying to get some stability. I had boys, you know, I wanted to just anchor myself somewhere. It just wasn't happening. Everything was getting destroyed around me constantly. I ended up stumbling into a clairvoyant institute. And they really helped me understand what I was dealing with. And they said, you know, they understood that, you know, since I was a kid, I've been on this heavy, heavy mission for Gaia. And like I said, when I gave the intro, connected to, you know, understanding the positive timeline, holding on to it for dear life, knowing that I have to go through some level of incredible darkness and death and all sorts of trials and tribulations to hold this vision and to not lose it, because there was a heavy energy on me that just wanted to destroy, and kick me off of it. Similar to the, you know, what the feminine energy has been dealing with in history, which is wipe out the civilizations, control, and have the demiurge energy lock it down and control it. And it even tries to partner it, actually. Ugh, gross. No, I'm sorry. So anyway, I just finally let go. I say stupid things sometimes. So I finally let go, and I was taken. I can't get it up on this computer, so I have it on my iPhone. A very unusual text on my little iPhone. But anyway, I end up in Maryland, and I was in California before that happened, and I'm just dragged back, and I'm just letting the forces take me, and I'm just totally in surrender mode. And that's good, because the I Ching teaches us this. There's times to be receptive, times to be creative. And I've said, I'm full on receptive now. I'm just going to see where it takes me. And I'm just not going to try and create anything. So here I go, woo, and I'm on a plane, and here I'm back, and you know, like I said, I could not create anything. So here I am in the basement of my mother's house, losing my mind. I'm like, ugh. And I mean, her and I are so different, and no disrespect, we're just extremely different. She doesn't understand this other stuff, and I think it's hard for a lot of people too. But this is where there's a lot of validation to some of this more mythological thing, because you know, on a governmental level, I knew that a lot of my path was about destroying the military-industrial complex, taking it down, transmuting it, doing whatever. I had an affinity to getting into the ET thing and the political domain and shattering the mind control aspect of it and bringing it back to some level of order where it's not New World Order, it's equilibrium with the cosmic ecosystem within all of us. And to realize that we're all one, we're all equals, and Venus really represents a unified field. And so anyway, so I just go online and I'm just hanging out, and I joined this Christ Sophia forum because it's just, that's all I ever think about and write about. I wrote a book called The Grail of Venus, and it's really about sacred union and a lot of what I'm talking about. And a lot of the book is gone, and that's another story. So anyway, I see this person, and he just says he's looking for this particular person who understands this or is connected to it. And after being at the Clairvoyant Institute, and they made it clear, you know, you're really carrying this code, and you're really, you know, living this path. You know, validating the fact that they even said, one person said, yeah, you've been clearing wormholes from inorganic entities as a kid. And I was like, yeah, because I wrote that in my book and I was writing about it. I'm like, wow, somebody's picked up on that. And I know I've talked to some other women here who've been on similar paths where you just, you know, it's like doing soul work, but you kind of step out of self and you're not like a person anymore. You're just transparent to the Gaia body and the cosmos, and you just give yourself to just the totality of it all to get to, you know, where we want to go. And so they acknowledged that in the archetypes and all of this. So I was like, okay, feeling pretty certain that like I was on track and that I did have self-awareness. I wasn't crazy or delusional. And so, but like I said, you know, it only goes so far. There's a lot of destruction energy that was always hitting me. Destroy yourself, destroy, destroy. So I had my bouts with drinking too much and having a tough time here and there. And so I was always trying to ward away the destruction energy, because after this amount of time in our cellular memory and in our soul memory, we carry, you know, that feeling something really wants to destroy me or destroy this whole thing. And, you know, it ends up kind of, you take a kind of person, it kind of gets to you, and then you kind of feel like, yeah, let's destroy me. So I had this destroy, you know, or just, I can't take it anymore kind of escapism thing. I didn't really want to destroy me. You know, self-love, but just couldn't take it. Just, the energy was too much. Just being blasted by this other thing, which, okay, literally, what I'm talking about right now is a year before my Mars recruitment. So this is right beforehand, and that was pretty severe. So this was weird because this happened right before I had moved to the East Coast at this point. And so, and the person that I'm telling you about now lived really close to where the agent met me at this festival. So anyway, he's writing all this stuff, and I just I just had this feeling like, okay, he knows something. And I just feel like all this kind of control and all this energy that wants to pull me here and there is sort of ceasing every time I talk to this guy. But he freaked me out, and I just, but I knew he knew something. It's like he had turned kind of dark, I guess you could say. Even though he understood the myths, he understood the cosmology, he understood everything there is to possibly know about, the Venus path, about, things in creation, about Gnosticism, about Sophia. So anyway, I was writing, and I wrote a whole bunch of stuff, and people were like, wow, and, connecting to it, because it wasn't coming from research, it was coming from my heart, and they're like, wow, this really explains a lot. And so anyway, he writes to me, he's like, well, I think, you're, and I was like, yeah, I was getting the same feeling that somehow there's something here that we need to explore. So we decided that we would meet. And he had been like a hermit for years and years and years, and he, was just smoking a lot of cigarettes, drinking a lot of Coca-Cola, and just like turning into this whole other entity, just really angry in a way, and just really, just weird. So when I do that, I won't explain. And my nose ring falls out. I don't want people to think I have a compulsive need to pick my nose. Sorry. So anyway, I meet up with him, and his whole house is filled with books. I mean, the whole thing is like a shrine. And so I sit down with him, and he sees my labyrinth, which is connected to Ariadne, who goes through the labyrinth, which is the underworld, which is similar to going through the 7 gates of hell, which is a part of the restoration process of calling your power back, releasing yourself of the false matrix, and the masculine energy, has not only been the demiurge, but they've planted themselves in the underworld. That's where Hades is. That's where, these dark lords are the gatekeepers of the feminine mother womb, right? So the labyrinth, is the path of busting through those gatekeepers and reclaiming that energy. Anyway, so I sit down with him, and he sees the labyrinth, and he says, starts going off about all the stuff about his name Zagreus, and starts talking about Dionysus, and that his connection to Ariadne is huge, and this and that, and he says, okay, he's like, first of all, when I saw you, I just had this feeling, and he's like, okay, now I'm convinced, because we had talked for a while, and he just couldn't understand how I knew what I knew, because I'm not much of a researcher when it comes to this stuff, more of the stuff that is a little bit more complicated, like the ET stuff. I'll do a lot of research on that, but this stuff just kind of, it's just it's very intimate just to my path, so I understand it. So anyway, he says, oh, I have something to give you. I have to show you something. So, I just met him, and he didn't really know if I was, what he thought he was looking for, because like I said, he said Lady Alchemia, Alchymia, and it's connected to Sophia. It's the alchemy of creation, of going, this whole journey and this whole path. And so anyway, he goes into his bookshelves, and it's really like hidden away, and it's underneath something, and he just pulls out this book, and it's this huge book, and he flips through, and he says, you have to read this. And I was like, okay. And I look at it, and I have a copy here. I've only given it to a few people, just, those that are researchers and that understand stuff, just to be like, well, what do you make of this? And anyway, what it was an interview that he had 20 years previously. He had it with this woman who seemed to shapeshift, and just very eccentric. He met her in his dreams first, and then met her in the physical. And she claimed to be Eve, as in Eve. And she had kept an orb inside of her body, which was called the Philosopher's Stone, made out of 9 ingredients that kept her alive this whole time. And what she would do is she would hang out with people and live certain lifetimes, and as that person's lifetime was coming to an end, or as they were aging, she would, remove it so that she could age with them, and then right as they were about to die, she would put it back in and regenerate, and basically it was what was keeping her immortal, and that she had never died, and she's been around this whole time, right? So he's thinking, when he met her 20 years before I met him, that he didn't really believe it. He wasn't really buying it, and but he talked to 3 or 4 other people that are included in here, and so I'll just give the intro. Long ago I met a woman who called herself Siena Vena, which is vein of the earth. Declaring herself to be Eve who never perished, still alive from the beginning. She spoke to me through my mind, she spoke to me in the astral realms, she spoke to me in person, and she spoke to me in written correspondences. She foretold of many things in my future and knew of things in my past. And, okay, so I'm going to kind of jump ahead. But one of the aspects that preoccupied him was this concept of Sophia, which she talked about. It took Siena Vena, who used the term mothers, but not goddess. Like I said, 3 sisters, right? But then the others that he talked to said goddess, and hearing it was becoming aware like a lightning bolt had struck. What brought it home to me was that Vena and the others said that I would meet her in person. Okay, I'm not reading this because I don't claim to be anything. I'm no more anything than anybody else. I don't use that terminology on myself because it's just like, no. But the point is, it's a term for, not in the sense where, maybe in older systems would call it some sort of hierarchy type thing, but really it's just about, the planetary body and Gaia. And so, the true version of the word would be in that transparency and just connecting to Gaia. And that's why we meet a lot of people that's why women always call each other goddesses, right? Because we just know we're connected to the earth. We know that it's much larger than us and that we're on a path to restore this planet. So we refer to each other as such because we know it's not about us or little me's, with our little dramas. We know that we're here to do far greater work. So that's what the word means to me, is that, obviously I'm here to do far greater work like many, but it just was weird because to me this was a testimony to how much I needed to stay on track. Because what it ends up doing is, there's a lot, it goes on and on and on, but it says, it starts to describe her, this person that he would meet. Tall, slender, reddish, strawberry blondish hair if sunlit, fair complected, wide-eyed, blue eyes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, I guess I kind of, I don't know, I guess that's me, sort of. But anyway, it goes on and on to the point of describing personality. And let's see. Veda said that she would see herself in the greater scheme of things. Chris said she'd be wild and fiery. Sandra said passionate and mysterious. All three noted that she would have somewhat... Sandra said she'd ultimately be a loner. All three said she'd be extroverted but introspective and would try to balance the two. Sandra said she'd be confused and drowning in her humanness. Okay, when they said that, confused and drowning in her humanness, that's like completely okay. Because I was like, if they're going to just say all these wonderful things, it's like, I'm sorry, you met the wrong person because I'm just not having it. Because like I said I was done almost every day. So, and it said, wealth would not be her drive. She'd be a nature lover. And it just keeps going on. And then he says, then out of the blue came Laura, the anomaly of all these descriptions put together, and I was immediately struck. And anyway, so that connection was made, and the rest of it is what's more interesting than the fact that there seemed to be some coincidence or some lineup. It just was my path, and it was written that, okay, he would meet the particular aspect of the three mothers that connected to Sophia in the Venus thing. So, like I said, I carry this code, and it's a universal energy, so it's accessible simply through transparency. And most women in the room, maybe all of them, have completely connected on some level to this and have shared it with me, and I'm blown away because, it's like, we're not alone, we have each other, and it's just amazing. We've taken on different parts of it. I know I signed up for a pretty extreme one, but, there's no way it's an us thing, it's a unity thing. We're all, taking on our different roles, and maybe we'll trade next time. So I'm happy to give mine up, please. So anyway, it goes on to say all this stuff, because obviously he's going to ask questions. He asked questions about the orb, he asked questions about Adam. Okay, so want to find out what happened to Adam? Yeah. Okay, so hold on. Okay, but this is one of her quotes. And although I struggled with my lives and loves, and that I could grow old when I removed the orb from my body, but upon replacing it again, regaining my stature, I would have to change my circumstances and my entire visage to be once again ever mobile. So he says, I spoke to this amazing woman of whom I spent 12 hours taking notes, filtering her words through my skepticism, but enjoying them amidst her eccentricity. I asked her questions, but he was skeptical, he's saying. So what happened to Adam? Well, when Adam was alive, in the beginning, he was merely an automation, that is, no better than an animal. The latest and failed attempts to give this creature any reasoning powers beyond the instinctual notions that all creatures come forth with, that of survival. You mean that Adam was nothing but an animal? And then she says, I'm so weary of the god of this realm. This is the little g. But at least his attempts to create life brought us some wondrous creatures, and it was eons before Adam was made of the same mud of this planet as those creatures. You must understand, although there was an abundance of life, they were all soulless. So Adam was without a soul. Indeed, and I came into the picture by the graces of my mothers, Dianu, Lilitu, and Oracina Sophia, which is soul of the world is Sophia. That's why this is really what's connecting to the underworld in this type of journey, because if you're doing world soul work, you can't do it from up there. Adama, she called him, was a soulless being, no greater, no less than the creature surrounding him. The only reason he was not eaten was the safety shield put around him, and yet he himself did not need to eat. He was actually more than and less than the creatures around him. This was only thing at first that set him apart from the rest. He did not require sustenance in the same manner. His flesh was able to absorb water, and his membranes drew from that their vital sustenance, much like a plant from the air. Yes, he saw how those other creatures devoured each other. In his attempts to eat, he would only extricate it all again, his belly unaccustomed to being filled to this manner. Okay, so it continues as how he kind of, okay, do you mean that having a soul means not a whole soul? Okay, And what animals would have more soul than others, he asked. Okay, I will attempt to clarify you. A complete soul is not easy to sustain in a single entity. It would consume the flesh. You have to consider that soul is basically energy. Energy is a fire, you might say. It burns a given amount of time depending on the substance that fuels it and the container or vessel that houses it. If the fire were greater than the container would simply melt, to use a descriptive analogy. Did I mention to you that the soul is feminine? Only the feminine can divide itself and bear fruit of itself, but in a body such as most, it cannot contain a complete soul. Therefore, soul is feminine and masculine as it separates itself from that. I mean, it just goes on and on. So apart, basically, okay, so what point in history is this, right? We know the Anunnaki had something to do with the tree of life before Adam and Eve happened, right? So what happened was the Anunnaki, the demiurge, the lower G god that she's weary of, that we all are, used, you know, this was where the genetics started to get mixed with apes and things that were more creatures and animals. She later says that his predecessors were apes. This is different than, you know, the origins of most of us. We're all extraterrestrial origins. I mean, we come from all over the galaxy, but the thing with the Adam is that he was made in the image of this demiurge god, purposely manipulated to carry a specific role. And that's why, and she comes to say, you know, why Lilith ran away. Because this wasn't really the consciousness of unity. This was about sort of the dominance. And so what we're dealing with in creation is the restoration of sacred union. And this pair was not a prime example of sacred union. This was, you know, an energy that was reflective of the demiurge, and the Eve energy came from the three mothers to compensate for the fact that Lilith ran away. So I think everybody's just trying to be like, okay, what do we do in this restoration process? And so it goes on and on. It talks about the ingredients, and it talks about the different nature of masculine and feminine. It talks about Plato and all the stuff. How do we evolve? Okay, I mean, this is something that, you know, if anybody wants to see me personally to really get the whole thing, it goes on and on. But let me just, okay, this is going to be difficult. I was created of three mothers, well, in a sense. You know of the Holy Spirit. She's my direct descendant. That is, I was made by way of her daughter who fashioned me. Holy Spirit is both masculine and feminine, and so anybody can, you know, who's in tune can have that frequency. The Holy Spirit in the Greek's name, Sophia. Sophia has two sisters. Sophia is the feminine energy within all. So, you know, a Christ-conscious male would be embodying the Holy Spirit energy as well. Sophia has two sisters, Anu and Lilitu. She changes it slightly. They function together but separately in their actions, yet they are so intertwined it is difficult to discern them. They have distinct functions. To put it simply, only Sophia can create singularly, but she seldom does. Her first singular creation was this miserable god of this realm. The second was in redemption, her daughter Sophia, sometimes known as Zoe, who, you know, comes to earth. Okay, oh, they all have so many names to distinguish. I am of the younger Sophia, who takes mortal flesh. Of myself, I'm not entirely of this earth. I was fashioned in another place and brought yet to another where the first Eden was made by the cruel one. It was so long ago. I had two daughters where I was first fashioned. Yes, I was a virgin by today's standards, and there were no males that gave me these daughters. Zoe did. Also, I have a sister, an exact twin. Okay, so that goes off about that. Then she talks about all her children. And it goes on and on and on, about 28 children. Not to be outdone, my Thera, you know, talks about Cain and Abel, talks about, okay, the first tribes of Thera were the Semitic tribes represented later in the 12 Aboriginal tribes of the Jews. With Cain, the 12 Aboriginal tribes that came to be known as the Arabs. The Caucasian or Indo-European races came as the admixture of my other children, myself and both my daughters. Compared to my husband, Adama, I am so very pale and fair-skinned, and my hair the color of passion fire. From all these races mingled so early on came the Etruscans, later known as the Greeks and Romans, although the Romans adopted any race as their own amongst themselves, as nasty as the Romans were, they saw beauty in all of them. Although Thera declined to migrate once, okay, it just goes on and on and on, and I'm thinking, okay, this guy cannot just sit here really bored one day and just write all this. You know, first of all, he's skeptical. It's hot in here. So anyway, so he's never given it to anybody before. And I've never seen him again after, it took me a year to kind of get away from him. Not, you know, it's just, basically what happened was after he met with this woman, 20 years previous to meeting me, after 2 years of not being able to find her, he lost his mind and cast a huge spell. And he was into alchemy, he was into magic, and he did dark magic against bad people, but it was magic nonetheless, like child molesters and stuff. And he had a business card, and he showed it to me, of that he had these services. If, you know, you wanted to screw somebody up, you know, I can do a spell, was his thing. And that was, and he kind of looked like the devil, and I'm not saying he was, but he was, something had morphed in him, he just, this is something really weird. So anyway, he cast a spell, and he used an altar, and he actually used a female on the altar to invoke some entity to go and get this person that he was looking for, right? We figured out that when he did that spell, I was 7 years old at the time. He had no idea. They never said when he would meet this person or when this would happen, because I told him, I said, since I was 7 years old, I've had a control force on me that has been so intense that I finally let go of it, and then I meet you. And this is really weird because now that I'm with you, I don't feel that control on me. I said, you have to break the spell because I want my life back. And so, you know, he's like, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And so we had to make some deals and bargains and just sort of, I mean, it took me, yeah, like I said, a year to break away because there was a lot of manipulation. There was like I'm the only one who understands your path and this and that. But some wires had been like tweaked or something because his idea of what needed to happen for me next, I did not agree with at all. It was in a realm that just, you know, wasn't happening for me. And he said he carried the Dionysus energy and it was connected to Ariadne, and he was convinced that him and I, you know, were meant to be together forever. And I just wasn't feeling it. I knew I had a lot further to go. And so because he was a magician and because he did all these rituals, it was kind of hard to pull away. And like, even though my heart wasn't in it, I mean, I was appreciating him as a friend and the synchronicity and all this stuff. So it took about a year and a half to pull away from him, but he said, you know what? Okay, I said, well, he said, I'm going to give you what I read to you because it is yours. And he says, I'll give you that. And he said, I'll write you a testimony too, because later on, you know, when you're going to do your path, people are going to think you're nuts. So you can have this, I'll write you a testimony. It's on my website, the testimony that he wrote about how he really just, you know, believes that what they were warning him about. So I have that on my website, and he gave me that. But then the bargain was, it doesn't even matter what the bargain was, but anyway, I finally got away from him. And then I meet Agent X to take me to Mars, right? So, all right, so that's Eve. Eve's still alive, supposedly, and I'm thinking, why did she put this guy on me? Why didn't she just meet me personally? What, you know, it's like, something's just not right here. I'm like, what is up with her to just, you know, and all these others to give him all this information? Like I said, this is pages and pages long. I barely scratched the surface. I've just given little tidbits. But there's a lot of really interesting information there to kind of dispel some of the myths and some of the maybe the inability for maybe some of us to accept that some of it is real. It's just not the way religion has written it. And I contemplated a lot. I mean, I've spent so much time with him and was aware of his path in his whole world and the books that he had written. He was kind of a Dante type. And I just, at this point, I just couldn't doubt it. I mean, I just couldn't doubt it. So here's the Tree of Life. This is really our blueprint. And if you see on the very top, it has Ein Sof, or what I was talking about in the beginning. This is above the crown. This is above Kethra, the crown, where the sacred union, the masculine and feminine, are in unity. And then, of course, Bina and Hokmah, you know, are the pair. And what's interesting is Doth. Doth is actually the underworld. In order to get to the divine pair, you have to kind of go through hell to break free of the programming and to break free of everything. So if anybody's been through that dark night of the soul or whatever, that's usually in order to find the inner harmony, the inner connection, the divine union within, which brings the person to a higher awareness and then eventually helps lift the veils. So, you know, that's just the whole kind of, and then the kingdom, that's really the earth. And so everything is kind of above that. So it's kind of representing, in a lot of ways, the kind of journey we're on where, you know, severity, mercy, and I mean, if somebody really studies it and just really gets to understand it, you know, one will really relate to this whole other reality, not just going to college and making money and having children and this and that. This is, you know, a blueprint thing that we're all up against in order to ascend, in order to really connect to who we are, that they have manipulated, and that the atom energy, which, of course, it's not about judgment, it's about integration and bringing that into, you know, the divine consciousness, the unity consciousness for wholeness, because restoration, integration. So anyway, that's the Tree of Life, that basically the Tree of Good and Evil ends up being a chance for one to break free of that lower G demiurge force. Because at this point, you have Adam and Eve, you have Lilith who ran off, which was really the original, one of the original mothers of Eve. Lilith is gone, she's birthing demons in some sea somewhere with Samuel. And yeah, I mean, everything's out of whack. And so what happens is the Tree of Good and Evil comes along. It ends up being about Kundalini. I mean, everybody's like, who's the serpent? Everybody's demonizing the serpent. Nobody really understands the serpent thing. Religion has demonized it. I think they call the snake the Lucifer, right? I mean, I don't know, because I never paid attention in church. My father became a Catholic priest, too, if you can believe it. So that's another weird thing in my story. Yeah. So anyway, the political and the religious, I was, I guess, born to deal with. So, the Kundalini, that's really the snake. Lilith, like I said in the beginning, represents kind of the Kundalini aspect. And of course, it's all, you know, a part of Sophia's emanations. It's a part of, you know, the first things that came out of her major aspects. Dark and light matter, the primordial seas, of chaos, the healing waters of Dhyanu, and the Kundalini. That's really the whole matrix of the feminine energy. And so because the demiurge and the lower creator God wanted rulership over Eden, wanted to change the whole scenario of sacred union into sort of this Adam and Eve print that we all carry, where, you know, Eve is fallen, she's a sinner, and Adam is, you know, Eve came out of the rib. Well, based on what I read here, I didn't get the rib thing, but, and that, you know, the soul is feminine. So, you know, men are actually, when they get in touch with their feminine side, they're getting in touch with who they really are. You know, this whole other thing, you know, works great because it's important to couples, so we're glad you're different. I mean, really. So, and I mean, whatever way anybody, you know, it's not even about gender. It's just, you know, whatever, you know, comes into balance for each individual. So here's the tree of knowledge. Now, the tree of good and evil, how did that become the tree of knowledge? Well, through being tempted by the serpent, one is able to obtain knowledge through all these cycles, which the zodiac helps us do, and helps us realize that this duality that was created is actually useful for us because we're not under some sort of control anymore. We have a choice to master what this is all about and to rise in the tree of life and restore it. Because this would be the tree of life thing that we saw before Doth, before the underworld, where, you know, one's not taking that journey to really understand itself and go through the darkness and go into the places that they want us to fear. And so they keep us locked under that energy of Doth. And actually the original tree of life, the root system in Doth were underground. It was the root system of the tree. And after the Anunnaki grabbed hold, Doth actually became way high up in the tree and were ruled by all these other things. Whereas the tree before the Anunnaki grabbed hold, which was more the Lumerian tree of life, had the root system. It was a normal tree that had branches, that had a root system, and you didn't have to go in the underworld because there was balance. And so one was connected to one's power, and there was magical abilities, psychic abilities, and the things that technology tends to mimic. But because of the Anunnaki influence, the whole tree actually changed. The whole blueprint changed within all of us. And that's part of the genetic manipulation. When we saw the Anunnaki standing around the tree of life, that's part of the manipulation because to get back to who we are, we almost have to die to get to the other side, to release ourselves from the programming and the conditioning. And so the tree of knowledge and that temptation from the serpent is saying, you know, through the knowledge of Kundalini, through understanding Kundalini and how it breaks all illusion, that is where knowledge can be had, and that's where the restoration of the tree can happen. And that was a gift and part of the divine plan when the Creator realized that a mistake was made. And that was part of the gift that the demiurge would come and try and enslave the human race. But the stories and these myths are connected to a deeper plan from the Supreme Being and the agenda of giving us a chance and giving us the free will, maybe in a mind-controlled way that we don't have to be controlled, but give us the free will to rise out of it. And it was like, here's this creation, and these lower entities are calling themselves gods, and the New Testament is written in order to, the Old Testament is written in order to serve that lower G God. This was a chance through the zodiac and through Kundalini and through these myths to get out of it and come back to the divine plan and the fact that it's inevitable and there's nothing that's going to stop it. We're just dealing with an imbalance that is attracting these parasitic entities. Yes, they're agents of the archons because they are natural demons that are created from living out of ego and living in an unintegrated way. We all know that anybody who's had a slap in the face in their lives because they're living out of ego too much knows the kind of demons that they can manifest in their lives. It's no different on a creative level. And so anyway, here's another picture of, you know, just the whole thing and the snake. And it's about connecting the upper and lower worlds. So everything in our creation right now is about inversion. Not just the pentagram, which is connected to Venus, being upside down, which is worshipped in the Church of Satan. I hate saying that word, I'm sorry. Because I just, okay, never mind, I won't go there. So the inversion, you know, Baphomet and the whole, you know, when people see the upside down pentagram, it's like, oh, well, that's evil. Because really it should be upright, because the upright is the fifth element, and then the other four are earth, air, fire, and water. Well, those four elements connect to the inversion, which is bewilderment, fear, longing, and all these emotions that Sophia was feeling. There are four of them. And that's why they feed on it, because as long as it's inverted, they can create fear, bewilderment, confusion, and longing in all of us by imprisoning us. And because they were created from that energy. Because when there was a leak in the pleroma, the reason the archons were created was because there was a longing to get back, and the primordial sea of chaos birthed the demiurge and the archons. So them keeping it inverted is what keeps them alive. Them doing dark rituals and feeding off of our energy and manipulating us is what keeps them alive. The minute that star turns upright again, where are they? They're either integrated, they're either healed, they either surrender and realize there's something above them and they can acknowledge it and allow us to enjoy it, or they're poof, they're gone. I mean, just like when we heal in our physical body, where'd the germs go? You know, where's the disease? Well, it's gone. Where'd it go? It either got reintegrated, transformed, or it just left. And so that's why they keep the star down, because that's their life force. As long as they convince us to stay in that vibration of bewilderment, fear, and there's 4 of them, which represent the points on the star, then we're imprisoned. So this all connects to Venus and the pentagram. And so the reptilians are serpentine too, and that's another inversion, where the Kundalini is serpentine in the sense that it's a snake. Well, reptilians are lizard-like and kind of serpent-like too. So that's another reflection of an inversion, where we all know the reptilians feed on pedophilia, sexual abuse, torture of young kids, and that is the most obscene version of Kundalini, a totally inverted version of it. And so that's what they feed on too, because as long as they can keep that coiled snake from going up and reaching the heavens and wiping out all this illusion and all this BS, they don't really have power. And that's what also connects to Kali and some of the underworld goddesses that are trying to rise and come out of exile. They're trying to keep them down, and they demonize them as being evil. And even Medusa was serpentine, and if you look at her, you'll turn to stone. And that's all, you know, because it's like the truth staring you in the face. It's like that power, but it's been so demonized that it has morphed a lot of the feminine energies into just this. They're in caves, they're hidden away. I mean, when Inanna came down to connect with Ashrikigal, I mean, she was a horrifying being, and it was an aspect of her that she had to learn to love. Just like all of us, we have to embrace the parts of ourselves that we hate in order to heal. And so because of all the shattering of her and the demiurge taking over, a part of her exiled herself to the underworld and was in complete and total just hatred of just a lot. So not hatred, but rage, because you know, she loves her children, and the planetary body is being completely affected and manipulated. So here's like the chakra system. They want to keep us 3rd chakra and below, disempowerment, emotional anguish, and survival. That's why they're the global elite. That's why they make all this money. That's why they run the banks, because as long as they keep us in survival and enslaved, we're not in our hearts, and we can't transcend. We can't really, it's hard to be a very spiritual being when we are attached to those sort of things. And so when Alfred was talking about why do they imprison souls, well, a lot of the times they get us addicted to the 3D realm, where we want to be born again. We want to have a deviant life. We're addicted to our TV, and we're addicted to, you know, just everything they feed us with, that our souls have some kind of attachment to reincarnating again and either enjoying, you know, the false matrix that they've created, or we come back to help others get out of prison and come home. And I think most of us here have come here to bring others home. And maybe a little bit of the other stuff, who knows. But, you know, the point is, it's chakra manipulation, and that connects to the Kundalini, which is at the root chakra, and the whole illumination thing, and they just want to keep us out of our hearts. And so most people who have let go of all attachments, it doesn't matter what you take away from that person, they're going to stay in somewhat control to not fall into the lower chakra trap. And they'll just, you know, let go and say, okay, you know, I'm homeless and I can make the most of it, and just be creative about it. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, Selena, who has a similar story about that, and I'm sure a lot of people do. Okay, so here's the Old Testament, and that's really the book of Yahweh, and that was the book of the Demiurge, and that was really about worshiping the Anunnaki, and it was written to worship the Anunnaki and forget about the feminine energy. But, you know, they had little, you know, things to you know, just to put her somewhere. They still had some sort of lesser versions that we see in mythology, where you'll still hear names, but they're way less power and way more diminished, because there's such a huge amount of that power and energy in the underworld. And there's still that cycle because of guys like this. Hades. I don't know why she's always naked, by the way. Maybe that's just her thing. But anyway, Hades. I mean, that's similar to some of these scenarios that I found myself in, where, you know, I was always kind of being yanked, you know. And Mars connects to Pluto, connects to, you know, control in a certain sense. So Persephone, where is her life after, you know, Lemuria and all this other stuff, and after the Pleroma? It's coming to Earth and basically being abducted by a masculine energy to imprison her in her own creativity, in her own womb, in her own life force, in her own planetary body, so that she can't be creative. And so that basically the seasons were created. And it's really that cycle of the goddess journey that connects to Demeter, which is her mother. And so this is kind of the progression of the myths throughout time, and how they, and then of course the labyrinth that underworld journey and just that maze and getting to the center where the Minotaur is and where the masculine energy is kind of taken hold and unwinding oneself of that. So this is really what's happening to the feminine energy is going through constant cycles of being exiled, being almost kidnapped, being taken away, and that would manifest in most of our lives as feeling repressed, feeling shut down, and feeling like, you know, when we're in partnership, we're just trying to get respect or something. But I mean,